It's the Deadline Junkies podcast with your hosts, Jordan Imiola, Kerstin Porter, and Rand Shami.
Our guest today is Hugh Fink, known as a writer on Saturday Night Live, The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, Last Comic Standing, The Showbiz Show with David Spade, The Drew Carey Show, and a whole lot more.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for the credits.
Yeah, thanks for writing all that stuff, so I had to say it all.
Yeah.
It was a mouthful.
There's a whole lot more. But yeah, first question, can you talk about your stand-up and your journey to Saturday Night Live?
I started my stand-up in Indiana, where I was growing up, watching comedians on TV and deciding that's what I wanted to do. In college at NYU, there was a competition for college comedians, and there were co-winners of the contest. It was me and a guy named Robert Smigel, who went on to be Triumph the Insult Dog comic. So he and I won, and that kind of gave me a big boost of confidence as a college student to do stand-up. So I dabbled in it in New York City, and then I decided to move to LA to pursue stand-up comedy. And then I had a job in LA for a few years working for these CPA firm, so accountants that handled all celebrities. And they're still around, this firm, by the way. And so I was like, my first time ever face-to-face with celebrities and people who were making a lot of money. But after I did the job for 2.5 years, I was able to quit and literally support myself doing stand-up comedy. I never looked back. And so awesome. I did stand-up for 11 years based out of Los Angeles, but traveling the country, doing colleges, worked my way up to being a headliner, started doing some TV as a comedian. And then during that time, I formed a friendship with David Spade. We kind of came up the same time in stand-up, and we had a similar sensibility. So when he got on SNL, he asked me to, on the sly, write stuff for him. But he couldn't really tell them that I was writing because that would make him look bad, although he's a great writer. But he loved the stuff I was writing. It was getting on the air on Weekend Update, particularly his famous Hollywood Minute, where he'd take down celebrities. And he came through for me in a big way by talking to Lorne Michaels, getting me a meeting, and getting me the job on Saturday Night Live. So that tells you sort of my journey from stand-up to SNL.
Nice.
Awesome.
So make sure you make friends with funny people. What was one of your favorite sketches?
So, Larry King died last week. Maybe my favorite sketch that I wrote on SNL that was a recurring thing was it was Norm Macdonald playing Larry King's News and Views. And to me, it's the meanest take of Larry King that anyone's ever done, because I really portrayed him as this senile, ass-kissing weasel who really had nothing important or original to say. And it was just the simplicity of, it wasn't him doing interviews. It was him sitting at a typewriter, straight to camera, pontificating about everything. So, everything from saying, of all the great black golfers, Tiger has to be one of the 8 or 9 greatest. Just stuff that was like redundant, and some of them were sort of borderline made you cringe. Like he goes, is it just me, or is Nelson Mandela overrated? So people go like, whoa. But people loved it, and that might be my favorite thing.
Nice.
Very good.
Awesome.
Did you have a favorite sketch that didn't get produced?
So yes, the first show after 9/11 was a huge deal. The whole country's watching.
Yeah.
And I wrote a sketch for Will Ferrell, where you guys know the singer Cat Stevens. You heard of him from the 70s?
Yeah.
So he became Yusuf Islam. He converted to Islam and changed his name and became very religious. But he'd been accused around the time of 9/11 of being sort of anti-American and anti-Semitic. So I wrote a bit for Will Ferrell, which was Yusuf Islam's greatest hits of all time. So it was Will dressed as Cat Stevens singing songs like Peace Train and Morning is Broken, but all the lyrics pertain to him being anti-American and anti-Semitic. So it made it to dress rehearsal, but I had heard that NBC hated the sketch. They thought it was incendiary and would cause problems if it aired. And it made it to dress rehearsal, and then it got cut.
How do you deal with that when one of your sketches you love gets cut?
Well, if you're a writer at Saturday Night Live who wants to survive, you have to deal with things being cut all the time because it's part of the life of a writer there. And sometimes you may not think it's fair, and maybe it isn't fair, but it's definitely part of the existence of that show. You just have to sort of get pissed off and vent, but then move on and write more stuff. But everyone, the longer you're there, the longer you deal with that rejection. But it makes you resilient and you don't give up and you keep writing funny stuff.
How many sketches are due a week, or is it like a certain number?
Well, the more senior you are, the more sketches you're allowed to submit.
Okay.
So when you're a new writer there, you're only allowed to write one sketch. But the most I probably ever submitted was 4. But I tended to write 2 to 3 per table read.
So Hugh, you've worked on a lot of shows. Which would you say is your favorite, and what made it your favorite?
The Showbiz Show with Spade was among my favorites because I created it. I pitched the pilot got made, went straight to series, was on for 3 years. And so it's mine, like I hired all the writers and I hired the director and the set design. So I can really take pride and ownership of an entire TV series coming from my vision. In terms of stuff that I worked on that I didn't create, besides Saturday Night Live, which obviously was a life-changing career experience that I'll always value, I really enjoyed it. I co-wrote the NBC Muppets movie that we shot in New York, and we had all these amazing cameos ranging from Uma Thurman, Nathan Lane, Jane Krakowski, Whoopi Goldberg. And I'm not a movie writer, but it was a movie, it was a hour-long movie shot in Brooklyn and New York City. So that was definitely a great experience.
Nice. How did you get involved with that project?
Strangely enough, the Muppets were bought by Disney. Remember, this is like 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And Disney wanted to make the Muppets more relevant. So one of the things they decided was, instead of getting kid writers and puppet writers, they'd get sort of an edgy late night writer. So I was approached, and I'll be honest, I wasn't really a Muppets fan, nor didn't know that much about them, but I'm a quick learner. And I brought in 2 younger writers who knew the Muppets really well. So they educated me on the characters and stuff. So that's how I was able to do it.
So who's your favorite Muppet now?
Great question. I guess I would say, do you know this Muppet named Pepe, who's like a newer Muppet? That was my favorite when we wrote the screenplay because he's a mean Muppet. But I guess Statler and Waldorf, the 2 old guys who sit in the balcony and make fun of people, that's probably my favorite. Yeah. I'll tell you, I don't like Miss Piggy. Find that character very grating and annoying. So that's my least favorite Muppet.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the antagonist of the Muppets.
Yeah. Kind of. I would say
she really is.
Yeah.
So you haven't talked much about Last Comic Standing, and I am really kind of curious because from what I know, it's a contest and it's basically comedians coming on competing, but you're listed as a writer. So I'm curious what you did on that show.
Great question. I was a writer-producer. So there were things in the competition that had to be written. So my favorite thing I did on that show was there was an episode where they brought in Gilbert Gottfried, the comedian, the famous guy.
Yeah.
And the remaining contestants on Last Comic Standing were asked to roast Gilbert, just like a Comedy Central roast. So they all had to write, their own jokes roasting Gilbert. I, on the other hand, was asked to write all of Gilbert's comebacks about the contestants. So it was a blast because I wrote the meanest takedowns of all these, wannabe comics who aren't even famous. And I was cruel. And I expected that Gilbert would read my jokes and go, this one I'm not going to do. He said, no, I'll do all of them. Because he didn't care. They were going to cut him, right? It was for NBC. So if I wrote him like 50 jokes, honestly, only like 15 of them appeared on the TV show when it aired. But he did not give a shit. And I remember I had a really mean reference to Amy Schumer because Trainwreck was about to come out. And I did a joke about her. He didn't care.
Can you talk about, you've written for the WGA Awards for several years. Can you talk about that?
Yes, sadly. Funny you ask, because this is the first year in 7 years that I'm not executive producing. And the reason is they're going to do it as an online award show. And, that's a much smaller event. So they've already said, hopefully they want to bring me back next year to do the live show, which is in front of 1,000 people. And I love doing the Writers Guild Awards. When I took over, the show honestly was pretty boring and not funny and just didn't have any hip factor. But when I interviewed with them, I said, look, it's kind of embarrassing if the Writers Guild Awards isn't the best written show. It's the fucking writers.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that got me hired. So the writing's been exceptional. It's usually about 4 people with me. They're all comedy writers, great joke writers, great sketch writers. And I've turned the show into sort of I would say the comedy is what people remember most about it. Although, we have to have respect and reverence to the nominees. And there's these Lifetime Achievement Awards that have gone to everybody from Aaron Sorkin to Shonda Rhimes. So, there's those big people, but during the show, we still do some hilarious bits that Hollywood writers particularly love.
How many weeks do you guys get before?
Not that many, Jordan, a month. So the show's super topical. I'll tell you one of the greatest things when Patton Oswalt hosted during a year, and Supreme Court Judge Anthony Scalia died that morning. Remember, he died in his sleep. And so I immediately said, okay, we got to do jokes about this because writers hate him. And the Guild, by the way, was fine. They're like, yes, do jokes about Scalia. So we did, and they went over huge. I mean, with that audience, it's kind of a dream crowd, right?
Yeah.
Funny, smart comedy writers. That's an audience you want.
Yeah, it's awesome. I remember I've listened to them on podcast. I can't remember what podcast it was, but I know there's a WJ podcast, or I've heard the shows live.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Oh yeah, I was laughing a lot. But the first time I heard it, I was like, wow, this is really funny for an award show.
Oh yeah, Chelsea Peretti hosted, 2 years ago. She was fantastic. And she did jokes really about the white middle-aged guys controlling writers' rooms. So it was a little polarizing, but it was hilarious.
Nice.
And of course, we always crap on directors, and we're really mean jokes about agents. All the things that writers out here have to live with, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Can you talk about one of my favorite shows when I was a kid, the Drew Carey Show? Could you talk about that?
Yes. Well, that's great that it was one of your favorite shows. I joined it its last season. So it was already a successful working show, which is a cool way to get to experience a show where it's sort of, they've worked out all the kinks and the characters are well defined. And I will tell you, it was an A-list of comedy writers when I joined it. Dan O'Keefe, who's gone on to do Silicon Valley and Veep. He was a senior writer there. Dave Kaplan was the showrunner. He now runs The Conners, which is the spinoff of Roseanne,
yep.
Right? Who else was there? Bruce Rasmussen who is sort of gone back and forth between drama and comedy, but major network shows. So really talented group of writers. And for me, Jordan, it was more, I'd say kind of a learning experience. What did I learn? I hate sitcoms. That's what I learned. And I don't mean I hated the Drew Carey Show. I just don't like the creative process of breaking stories for 20 episodes. The characters can't really change, right? Your own ideas get molded into everyone else's. It's not, sitcoms do not encourage individualistic comedy writing. It's about the group. And I have a hard time with that because I'm a stand-up and I came from SNL where I got to write my own stuff. I was used to having it done my way. And that's not, the only exception would be if you created your own sitcom. Then at least you could kind of call the shots, but you're still gonna have to take network notes and all that ridiculousness. I don't know how you guys feel about writing for sitcoms, but I really did learn that it was not for me.
Did Craig Ferguson like lead the Drew Carey connection?
No, pure coincidence.
Oh, wow.
Had nothing to do with it. In fact, when Craig hired me, he didn't even know I worked on the final season of Drew. Because Craig was a guest star. He didn't do every episode of Drew Carey by then. Yeah, he only came in for like 3 or 4 shows. But the Craig Ferguson show, he took over for Craig Kilborn, who you might remember. But the problem was Ferguson is not really a stand-up. He didn't know comedy writing. So when he came aboard, he inherited the entire Craig Kilborn staff. But that staff wasn't really the right people to be writing for Craig Ferguson. So they brought me in and I was given the unenviable job of having to decide which writers to fire and which to keep. And I didn't know these writers. So I had to sort of figure out quickly which ones I felt were capable of writing for Craig and which ones weren't.
You have worked with a ton of comedians. It's so impressive. Do you have a favorite comedian?
Maybe not a favorite, but I can tell you sort of among my favorites. So
yeah,
David Spade for sure, Chris Rock, Brian Regan, nice, who I got to work with on his Netflix series a couple years ago. He's brilliant. More contemporary, I've never worked with John Mulaney, but I think he's great. We know each other, but I've never written for him. Trying to think, who else? Wanda Sykes, great, I've worked with. That's sort of Bill Burr. He did the Writers Guild. Awesome. I actually he had never done an award show before. I was the first guy to get him to do an award show. So he was really, really funny. He just talked about how out of place he felt in a tuxedo, kissing writers' asses. he was great. So yeah.
What do you feel makes a great comedian?
Bothers me about current stand-up and the art form of stand-up is that people forget, besides being a great writer, you have to be a great performer. And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about 5 minutes on TV. That's actually easy to do a great set. But to be a performer live, right, at a club or a theater or a college, you have to captivate an audience for 30 minutes to an hour. And in order to do that, you've got to be a great performer. And I feel like a lot of stand-ups these days are really lacking in their performing ability, meaning they just don't know how to connect to a live audience. They have their material and they're sort of like, they're going to do it. And if you like it, great. If you don't like it, too bad. But a great comedian is beyond that. A great comedian knows how to make the audience like them by having the skill to, personalize it and be in the moment. And sadly, I think there's not as many current comedians who do that well.
What about off the stage? Do you have any comedians that you just love hanging out with and think are great people?
Yes, there are many. I'll throw one name to you who I talk to every day. Alan Havey, who you guys might know from Mad Men.
Mm-hmm.
He starred as Lou, Don Draper's boss, the final seasons of Mad Men. He's a great comedian, but he's also a great actor. So I love hanging with him. And generally, though, comedians are not fun to hang with because they're either too needy of, or they can't be in the moment. They can't sort of turn it off, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, that's not true with, I think the great comics are able to, but it's the ones who maybe are the notch below that. Sometimes it's a struggle to enjoy hanging out with them.
Yeah. Do you think that's also part of then being able to form great relationships, like actor-writer relationships?
It can be. You're right. It can be that. I think that for any, actors, writers, comedians, there's an insecurity that comes along with people who do it, right? So their insecurity can sometimes just get in the way of them being able to be friends in the normal way that people approach friendships.
So being able to form those friendships, do you think those are beneficial in performances in the profession?
Absolutely. Because if you can form a friendship with someone who generally is talented and likes what you do, then of course they're likely to want to help you. Not all the time. Sometimes they might be competitive and deliberately not help you. But if it's a good friendship, then absolutely. And
then you get on SNL because you're writing for David Spade.
Right. And by the way, I will tell you, I would never got on SNL without David Spade. It would not have happened. So I give him tremendous credit for that. And again, I did talent-wise that I deserve to be on the show. Yes, but talent doesn't always win out. And that show's highly political. And it was a huge thing that I had formed a friendship with David.
Do you have more friendships that you're grateful for besides David Spade?
Yeah. So someone who helped me early in my career was Bob Saget, who you know from Full House and various movies. He was a great comedian back in the day, but then he got pulled out of stand-up and became a major TV personality and sitcom actor. But back in the day, he was a great stand-up. And I learned from Bob that everyone who works with Bob thinks that he's pretty easygoing and nice to work with. And what always stuck with me is I wanted to emulate him in the sense of being a nice, approachable person. So he certainly had an influence, and we're friends to this day. He's kind of from a different generation of comics than me, but we've maintained a friendship. And then another person I collaborate with all the time now, who I would say you know him more as an actor, but he's doing stand-up, is David Koechner from Anchorman and The Office. He played Todd Packer on The Office. Pac-Man. So we started at Saturday Night Live together. So we've maintained a friendship since, and now we're doing stuff, and he does stand-up too. So I really love relating to him because we've had this long-standing professional relationship.
Do you still do stand-up?
Yes, but it's been, since early March, the pandemic, I've not set foot on stage. And I still love doing stand-up. And the performing part comes easy to me. The frustrating part is writing, because I'm so pulled in other career directions to have time to sit down and write good material for myself. I won't blame anything other than say that it's just I've not done it. So, the joy of stand-up for me at this point is to go on stage with new material, but I just don't have new material right now to do.
Do you have like a writing method? Do you write in the mornings or afternoons, or is it just kind of anywhere and everywhere?
Kind of anywhere. Yeah. I was disciplined in some ways, but not in that way. It was more just inspiration.
Have you done any of the virtual stand-up?
I've not. And I'll be honest with you, that doesn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've not. No.
It's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I should mention with David, I've been producing these live comedy shows for corporations and businesses that he stars in. But it's not stand-up. It's more sketch where like we'll give someone at the corporation the ability to interview Todd Packer from The Office. So I write all the Todd Packer material. It's pretty scripted, but the person asking the questions doesn't know what he's going to say.
Yeah.
So they're reading the questions, and then David as Todd is responding. But that's really fun to do.
It sounds like it.
But again, like we have a rule, whether it's 300 people or 50 people, we don't want to hear laughter on those calls. It's kind of annoying. So I see people, like I see you guys on the screen right now. I might see 100 people and I see them laughing, but I don't need to hear it, and David doesn't either. And that's with stand-up, it's so weird, right? You're this art form that's completely reliant on a live audience response. And that's why the idea of doing it as we are right now, doing stand-up, just seems kind of weird. I did go to see a concert at one of those drive-in movie theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear a band play live was fine because, they don't need to hear laughter.
Yeah.
But I've heard about those shows where comedians are performing at drive-in movie theaters, and at least it's live, but the audience is in the car, right? So they're not really hearing the response in real time.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Do you have a favorite joke?
Oh, man. Do you mean that I wrote or just someone else's joke?
Well, any. We'll start with any.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you yours.
Sure. So Drake Sather, a brilliant comedian writer who unfortunately is no longer with us, but if you guys look him up, you'll see he did David Letterman and stuff. Mm. He has a joke I've always loved, which is he goes, my girlfriend accuses me of being not respecting her boundaries and stalking her and having no respect for her right to privacy. At least that's what she wrote in her diary. So that comes to mind as one of my favorites. I also love Paula Poundstone's joke about, she said, Sirhan, who was convicted of assassinating Bobby Kennedy. He told the parole board that he should be released from prison because if Bobby Kennedy were alive today, he'd say that I should get out of jail. And she goes, how do you like that? The one guy who wants Sirhan out of jail, and he shot him.
That's funny.
All right. Now, do you have one of your own that
Well,
is a favorite?
to not be egotistical, I'll just throw you one of my quick, like a joke that's super quick to do that I like. I did this on David Letterman, which was there was a case you might remember of a dog mauling incident where this this guy was accused of basically his dog killed someone in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But the legal charge they tried him with was aggravated mayhem. Mm-hmm. That was the legal term. I said, but his lawyer says it's looking good to have it reduced to involuntary shenanigans.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I have noticed that you do seem to like some mean humor. I don't know how to put that nicely.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm not good at mean humor, if you couldn't tell.
Well, you're really nice. So, but hey, I'm nice and I'm good at mean humor, so you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a tip for doing mean humor? How do you make it work?
Okay, so number one, you have to be clever, right? Like mean is not funny if it's not clever. I think it ultimately has to be really clever. So that's number one. Number two is that there's different ways. If you want to say someone's a fucking douchebag, instead of saying they're a fucking douchebag, if there's ways to say, to convey that sentiment, in a more artistic way, then that's funnier, right? So I know you're a lot nicer than me, but so I wrote a joke that got quoted in the media a few years ago about Ann Coulter, who you guys know who that is.
Mhm.
So this is for the Rob Lowe Comedy Central roast, where she was seated in the audience. And I had Rob say, Ann Coulter's here tonight, and if you're wondering why, it's so that all the right-to-lifers know what an abortion looks like up close. Now that's vicious.
Yeah.
And it's also horrible visual, but you can see, like, I think it's clever, but it's definitely mean.
Oh yeah.
The way you word it too is like so good. Like, is there a certain rhythm you're always looking for, or do you?
You know what it is, Jordan? It's like, as a I'm a violinist, classically trained. I know it when I see it. Like, I have that stand-up comic rhythm that I know how something sounds. But obviously, with writing mean jokes like that, the shorter the better.
Mhm.
Like, it's always best to have as few words as possible. I'll give you an example, though, since you're all good writers, of how sometimes you need to have enough words to make the joke great. So I was, this is an incredible story for you. After 9/11, Daryl Hammond, from Saturday Night Live, he did a great Bill Clinton impression. And the Republican Congress, I kid you not, invited Daryl to perform in front of them at a Republican retreat that Vice President Dick Cheney attended as well. And Daryl picked me as his writer to go with him. So we flew to it was in West Virginia, maybe, at this retreat where all the Republican Congress was. And like, there's Secret Service everywhere, right? But my opening joke that I wrote, this is why I'm telling you the story, it was all about the wording. So picture you got all the Republicans there, and Daryl Hammond comes out in his Bill Clinton makeup. And he goes, keep in mind, this is a few weeks after 9/11. And he goes, once every generation comes a time when we as Americans have to band together as one to fight a common enemy who we all hate and despise and know is threatening the very existence of our lives. But enough about Hillary. And see, that joke, the reason I bring it up is noticed how the reason it works is because I had to be kind of flowery and really suck you in to it sounds like he's going to say Osama bin Laden or the Al-Qaeda or his whatever. But the reason that joke's worked is because it's loaded with all this flowery stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they went ballistic. I mean, that joke immediately won them over, and he could kind of do no wrong after.
Yeah. I think my favorite sketch I think of yours that I've seen is Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup. I love that sketch so much. I've laughed. I've watched it repeatedly because I've laughed at it so much.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, tell these guys it's really not that mean. It's got a couple of jokes.
Yeah,
He's made everybody watch it.
Aw, did you like it?
Oh yeah,
You did.
it's hilarious.
Thank you. And by the way, that
Fleetwood Mac songs.
That was written at 2 a.m.
Nice.
2 a.m. as my office at 30 Rock.
I feel like some of the best stuff is written when you're really tired and
It can.
done. Yeah.
Exactly. It didn't take terribly long. But I remember very well, like, it was fun to write. Sometimes you're writing something going, I don't even know. I think this is funny. I'm not sure. But other times you're sure. And that one I knew was funny to me. I didn't have any doubt about it.
Yeah, it's a great sketch.
Thank you.
I feel unincluded because Jordan did not share this.
Oh no!
He did before we jumped on, or when we jumped on, before you jumped on. He again shared with the group.
Aw.
I think I've heard him share it at least 4, maybe 5 times.
I have a question for you, Hugh. I'm curious. So you're so deep in the comedy world, but what do you want? What do you do for entertainment?
Great. I love watching serious drama.
That's what I suspected.
Yes, you're right. And, I veer toward stuff that seems reality based in crime and suffering. So, for example, whether it's Handmaid's Tale or Ozark, or most recently Mindhunter, about serial killers, all that stuff really appeals to me. There's a series about the CIA and the FBI not working together to stop bin Laden before 9/11. It's a Washington Post journalist called The Looming Tower. And it's amazing. It's Jeff Daniels and some other great actors. So I'm watching that now. But yeah, I tend not to watch comedy.
Yeah, I think a lot of comedians or a lot of writers watch things in other areas, in other genres.
Although you have to explain to me, like, you couldn't pay me to watch Bridgerton. Not like that genre is so something I have zero interest in, but it's the most watched show in the history of Netflix.
Yeah.
Well, that's more fantasy-like than what you're describing.
I understand, yeah. But I didn't watch the one about the Queen.
Queen's Gambit.
The Crown.
The Crown. I didn't watch The Crown.
Oh, that one.
Right, and I didn't watch Downton Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that just that genre does not appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
But man, they are popular. And Queen's Gambit was easier to watch because it's only 6 episodes. And it was sort of, I like that it's a period piece from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
That appealed to me, yeah.
Also, I know you teach a few classes. Do you want to take a moment to promote those? Or maybe-
Yeah, sadly, tomorrow night ends the run of my 5-week classes. But what I have to promote is, and this, I never forget, Jordan suggested this, is I'm going to start doing some one-off workshops.
Nice.
Maybe for just a 2-hour, 3-hour thing, make it more affordable, right? And I'll take on more students, so it won't have sort of the one-on-one ability that I did with Jordan's class, but it'll still be me sharing my expertise. And Jordan suggested topics like maybe how to write late night show monologue jokes, right?
Yeah.
And you guys feel like there's a lot of people who would be into that?
Oh yeah. I feel like for me, I've never done monologues. I've done everything else but monologues. It's something I'd be interested in because I'm not even sure how to even start that.
That's great. Well, I may be picking your brain a little more for what you guys think, but that's my next plan is in the next month or two to figure out some of those sort of one-off workshops to offer.
Yeah. What is your workshop or class offer right now?
Oh, so sketch writing for television. So I just offered 2 classes, an intro class and an advanced class, and they're 5-week workshops, 2 hours a session. And I limit, there's 10 people to the class. So everyone really loves getting very individualized feedback. Yeah. And for the advanced class, you're asked to write 1 sketch every week about a particular, in a template. So I read them ahead of time, so I have notes for you. And then I share them with the class. So we do a table read, so everyone else, can contribute jokes and ideas, but it's still, I'm basically running it. And that people found it really helpful.
How close is that to what you would do on a show, whether a late night show or Saturday Night Live? How similar is that structure?
It emulates it in a good way. Yeah, it's the timing obviously is different because at SNL, if the week starts Monday, you have to have your final polished script really turned in by Wednesday morning, and then you can tweak it between Wednesday and Saturday. Whereas with my advanced class, you have an entire week to write 1 sketch. So it's different in that regard. And the other difference is obviously at SNL, when your sketch is read aloud, it's read by the cast, which is incredible. For my class, I'll either read the entire sketch out loud myself, or I'll offer, if you, the writer, want to read one of the parts, like you do the voice, then I'm happy to do that. But we do have a table read, and I go full screen with the script on screen, so everyone's reading along. So it's really cool. And I'd like to think that the people in the advanced class, which is what you all would be, have found it incredibly helpful in terms of helping them with their packet if they're submitting to a show, or just like Jordan, I know you produce stuff, just sort of getting some fine tuning before you go shoot something.
Yeah. Nice.
And to promote it, the website is hughfink.com, right?
That's right. Very easy. Yeah. So look for updates on it, because I will definitely be putting on like what these new workshops are going to be and when. But absolutely. And yes, spread the word.
Yeah. hughfink.com.
That's right.
Exactly. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think we have one more question. Could you give any advice for like newbie sketch writers, or people just trying to get into sketch writing?
Number one, make sure you have a good premise. You can't waste your time. If you have like, oh, my sketch is going to be about two things, stop, don't do it. It should be one idea, one through line that you introduce as quickly as possible in your sketch. And then you have to, before you start putting pen to paper, know in your head the funny beats once you introduce your premise that you're going to build on to make your sketch. And I always say there should be at least 3 funny beats.
Yep.
3 is enough to make a sketch, right? It could be 4, 5, 6, but you got to have 3. And then don't worry so much about the ending, because no one cares. Like, you got to get them at the top. You got to build the laughter, and then just get the hell out. Yeah. It's not like it's not, this is not M. Night Shyamalan where you're watching a sketch going, oh my God, what's going to be the surprise ending? No one cares.
Okay, I have one question.
Yeah.
What about for people like us who have been writing for a while, have been doing sketch classes, have been writing pilots, all of that? What's one piece of advice you give us? We're trying to break into the industry. What is one piece of advice you give to us?
Try to pick the sketches that you spend time writing and producing where you go, I don't think there's anyone else who would come up with this idea, or if they had this premise, they wouldn't do the premise in the way that I'm doing it, meaning that it makes your voice stand out more, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that's the biggest advice I could give you, because, for example, you know how this thing in the news about Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon congresswoman, saying the thing about Jewish lasers, some crazy thing she said. Yeah. Well, I've seen so many references from comedy people to making jokes about what she said, but I feel like that would be a bad area to try to write a sketch, because everyone thinks they have a funny idea about it. So unless your take is so brilliantly different, chances are it's really not going to stand out. And that's what I mean by avoiding premises that other people are going to think of.
Yeah, I like that advice a lot.
Oh,
I haven't heard that. Yeah,
thanks.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the best sketches that I've written were definitely premises where people are like, wow, Hugh, I don't know how you thought of that. I wouldn't think of that. That's kind of the best.
Yeah.
I love that too, because I feel like with social media and everything, everybody's trying to do the hashtag that's popular. So we're all doing the same idea. So I love this idea of doing something original and different.
Oh, thank you. It's like if I were starting up a sketch show now, hopefully I'll get to, and I was reading your submissions, I'd be looking for writers, not just who have the craft down, but people who I feel like have an original voice.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
yeah,
thank you.
I'm going to do that.
yeah, definitely have your own sense of humor. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hugh.
Yeah.
That's good. That's all our questions.
One final thing, because I know some of you do stand up, whatever, is that I've been asked lately to do a lot of private coaching for either writing or stand-up. So like if you're submitting a packet to a TV show, but you want some help to make sure your packet is as strong as possible and you're not making mistakes, I do that. Like I'll just work with you for X amount of time, getting your packet in great shape. And stand-ups approach me all the time too about if they're just working on a set and they want help structuring it, editing it, you know, that's so ingrained in me. I like to do that and I can do it. So that's another service I offer.
That's HughFink.com. Are you also on social media at all?
Not actively. Meaning I'm registered, but I just don't make it a priority.
Yeah.
So we can follow you, just you won't be there.
Yeah, I won't be there. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can't compete with all of you on social media. I have my energy spent better doing other stuff.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a very powerful tool and I support it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Hugh. Again, the website is HughFink.com. Yeah, thank you so much for all the advice.
Yeah.
And for
Really fun. I'd love to come back and talk to you guys again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah.
Love hearing more advice.
Thank you.
Subscribe for more episodes and check out Sketches. Sketches written and performed by Deadline Junkies. Watch it at skedjes.com. Thanks for watching the Deadline Junkies podcast.